Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Your safe space for discussing all things sports, politics, social issues, and religion. This week, we'll discuss cybersecurity, how the law, among other things, can be fun. And your boy, the character that is Bill Gates. But first, a message from your content creator. Dear valued listener, how many people have you recommended listen to this podcast? If it's less than 85, you are a bad person. Like all of your other social media outlets and your podcasts and your other electronic mediums, I too want to read advertisements about products, about sponsors that I never had any idea existed. I too want to use a font on my webpage that appeals to the 16 to 30 crowd about how I'm a social media influencer. I can't do any of that until you get to work, dear listener. I can hear you now. I can hear you now through the ether. I'm married. I've got kids. I've got a job. I don't have time to go out and beat the streets pitching your podcast, jackass. I'm not asking for much. I'm not trying to put any additional pressure on you. I mean, if you're in a relationship, if you're married, you can't ignore your spouse for a day. I don't have any kids, but I can't imagine they demand your attention 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Take a weekend off. Let them roam around like wild animals. See what happens. I think you'll find they're more industrious and self-reliant than you ever gave them credit for. And you've got a job. Well, whoop-de-fucking-do. I've got a job, and I don't want to work at it anymore, and I can't get there unless you get out and pitch this podcast. I mean, I don't believe I'm asking too much. For all the married people out there, neglect your spouse. For all of the parents out there, neglect your children. For all the employed out there, neglect your job. Oh, wait.
Act 1 Cybersecurity is bullshit.
We love our automobiles. We love to travel. We love the freedom. Which means we need that oil. Oil is the lifeblood of Western society, is it not? Many of the values that we hold so dear, many of the things that we take for granted, these things are centered in oil. Taking a trip by car or plane, oil. Going to the grocery store, going to buy foods. Practically everything now is wrapped in plastic. That's oil. How are we going to preserve these mass quantities of foods that generally we don't need and that we often aren't going to eat? Well, hope abounds. Put it into a plastic container, put it into a plastic Ziploc bag, throw it in the fridge. Oil makes it all possible. Some enterprising and industrious people decided, well, being that oil is the lifeblood of 21st century Western civilization, why don't we go in and hack a pipeline, barter the security of the data, the information, hell, the operational systems of that pipeline for some cold, hard cash. Now, what we want to believe, I guess what we're led to believe is probably a more accurate way to say it, is that the cybersecurity forces out there, they're going to stop these types of predatory actions by these nefarious actors in parts of the world that we have no control over. That there's no legal ramification for engaging in such conduct. But that's just not the case. Generally, these companies are paying whatever ransom is being asked of them in order to retrieve the data, in order to ensure the integrity of the operational processes they have in place. This is becoming more and more familiar to us as consumers. More and more stories, we don't get a lot of detail, but anecdotally, nefarious group in a part of Russia, Ukraine, China, North Korea, Iran, these rogue actors in states that we have little diplomatic relations, little legal recourse. They hack into these institutions, whether they're private or public. They lock up their files. They provide a number, public or private institution pays the ransom. Interestingly enough, the ransom is generally what you would think a small sum. $50,000, $100,000. Major entities, million, billion-dollar entities. And these folks are simply saying, look, we've locked down this data, we've locked down these files, give us $50,000 or $100,000, we'll give you the data back. The Colonial Pipeline situation is a great example of this. What's weird, dear listener, is the juxtaposition of a situation like the Colonial Pipeline with what we are, as consumers, bombarded with when it comes to cybersecurity. We are inundated with ads about third-party services that we can buy to help protect our data. Different browsers we can use on the internet. Different VPNs. Different third-party monitoring systems. We are now challenged by many of the vendors that we use as consumers to create stronger and stronger passwords, quote-unquote, for our own protection. But let's think critically, not cynically, about this situation. What these entities are trying to do is to argue to your face, we're partnering with you in cybersecurity, in data security. You can give us your information. You can give us your money. It'll be safe with us. We are your partner. Consciously, this is what we see from these entities, public entities, private entities. But subconsciously, what is the message? The message is you, Mr. Consumer, Mrs. Consumer, are just as much a part of the cybersecurity infrastructure as we are. You, individual consumer, need to have stronger and stronger passwords. You, individual consumer, need to be more aware of the sites that you go to on the internet, of the browsers that you use, employing third-party watchdog mediums in order to make sure that you are safe, that none of the things that you're doing are going to compromise your data. How do you feel about that, dear listener? Does that sit well with you? Instinctively, and I mean instinctively, I think we know this is all bullshit. Look at the organizations that have been compromised by hackers. The United States government, the State Department, the Department of Defense, major U.S. banks, major companies like Google. These hackers can get into the most secure networks that exist on planet Earth. If these people can break into the U.S. State Department, to Fortune 100 banks, to the Googles of the world, the Amazons of the world, if they can break in to major U.S. infrastructure projects, why the f*** do I need to have a capital letter, a symbol, and a number as part of one of my passwords to order vitamin supplements? To order a pair of shoes from Nordstrom's? Hey, I'm an insecure simpleton. Will the new athletic shorts that I see on this Instagram post make me look fit and attractive like the model wearing them? Please, let me fork over my money to buy them. Oh, enter a password, you say. Okay, that should be easy enough. Oops, not strong enough. Oops, not strong enough. Why do I need to add an ampersand into my Carolina password or my huge meat password? Is this really going to protect me from the cyber criminals? Then I have to go through that overture of, okay, which website had the Carolina password with the ampersand in the first A of Carolina or in the second A of Carolina? Was that huge meat with a 1 or an exclamation point? Now, all your web browsers offer to save all of your passwords for you. Your phone offers to save all of your passwords for you. Then what's the fucking point? If the device that you're using is going to save all of your passwords in a password database, how is that protecting your security? Anyone that wants to hack into your personal data, they know where to go find the passwords. How stupid is this entire paradigm? How farcical is it? It's like having a man cheat on his wife and hide his condoms that he's using with his mistress in his wife's makeup case. There's an episode of The Simpsons. Yeah, that's right, I'm making another Simpsons reference. There's an episode of The Simpsons where Homer buys a gun. Marge freaks out, tells him to get rid of it. He says, "Don't worry, Marge, I'll hide it so the kids can never find it." Cut to next scene. Marge goes to the refrigerator, opens up the refrigerator, pulls open the crisper drawer. There's the gun. She confronts Homer, and he says, "When do the kids ever go into the crisper drawer? Your passwords aren't secret. My passwords aren't secret." It is the veneer of safety versus actually being safe. All of these organizations need to include us in the overall cybersecurity paradigm. But the fact of the matter is, we have absolutely no input into the cybersecurity world as consumers. We can't increase the cybersecurity structure of a major U.S. bank, of a state government, of the U.S. government, of Google, of Amazon, of Toyota, of Sony. But they have to make us believe that we are part of it. Why? First and foremost, because their cybersecurity systems are dog shit. Are absolute dog shit. Time and time again, these nefarious actors, these perpetrators, can infiltrate these systems with relative ease. How confident are you going to be giving your credit card information to Banana Republic, to Amazon, to Wells Fargo, to one of these prepackaged food companies? You need that veneer of security so that you're willing to continue in e-commerce. You don't want to simply believe that all of the organizations you're doing business with are secure. You want to believe in the overall security system, and then you want to believe that your small part, these passwords, these codes, it's also playing into the overall security of your data, of your financial information. The reality is we're all completely vulnerable. Completely vulnerable. Why is that? Because these companies, these organizations, these institutions are completely vulnerable. That leads me to my second point, the veneer of safety. We are safe as consumers. How so? Anonymity. Frankly, to most of these nefarious actors, most of these perpetrators that are holding these banks, holding these businesses, holding these governments hostage by way of encrypting their files, we are simply ones and zeros on a spreadsheet of data. These folks are hacking into Home Depot, capturing 500,000, a million, 2 million accounts and credit card numbers, going back to Home Depot, demanding $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, whatever the price may be. If Home Depot doesn't pay, then they'll go off and sell those individual account numbers, those individual credit cards. The strength of your password with Home Depot has nothing to do with that. Whether or not I use my huge meat 1 or huge meat exclamation point password, the electric drill and the water softener pellets that I bought from Home Depot have exposed me to cybersecurity fraud. I am only as safe as the network that Home Depot employs to protect my data. None of these hackers, none of these nefarious actors, these perpetrators are going to go and individually target me, encrypt my files, my data, my financial information for a ransom. What can any one individual pay if the amount of time and effort and energy is the same to hack an individual as it is a corporation? The corporation, the government, wants you to believe we're all in this together. We're all on the same team. But this level of safety, this veneer of safety, is no different than a child-proof bottle of aspirin. All these additional layers that are added on for the consumer do nothing more than just piss us off. It creates additional obstacles for us as consumers to actually conduct business, to actually sell or acquire goods, while at the same time being no more safe than if none of those controls even existed. Go on to YouTube. Type "child opens childproof bottle." Video after video of children between the ages of 2 and 4 opening up childproof bottles, either by simply opening the bottle as it is instructed. The child simply intuitively figures out how to open the bottle, or you see children smashing the goddamn thing and opening it. But illustrative of my point is the second type of video that you'll see. Video after video of adults showing you different tricks on how they open these pesky childproof bottles. The veneer of safety versus actual safety. A universe where children are opening up these bottles with ease, intuitively, mind you, and you've got a series of videos made by adults for adults on how to open these things, because after having bought a product, they can't access it without smashing it open like a 4-year-old would. More veneers of safety? How about the Transportation Safety Administration? We hear anecdotal reports all the time. People sneaking guns onto planes. Auditors hired by the government to test the strength of TSA guidelines, of TSA restrictions, of TSA in practice. Sneaking all sorts of different dangerous materials and weapons onto planes. The veneer of safety so that we will continue as consumers to engage in that business. I have no more outrage left. I have no more fear left. Our infrastructure in the United States is vulnerable. Our data in the United States is vulnerable. Our financial information in the United States is vulnerable. Whether your password is huge meat 1 or huge meat exclamation point isn't going to make a bit of difference in that.
Act 2: The law can be fun.
It serves everyone involved in the legal practice to have a sense of humor. For those dear listeners that do not know me personally, yes, I am a practicing attorney. Oh, you may say, that's why you're such a preachy douchebag. No, I was a preachy douchebag before I became a lawyer. There is this impression by the general public, lay people if you will, about law, lawyers, how it shapes a person's personality. The fact of the matter is, most people just bring all of their animosity, their insecurity, their contempt to the law. The law does not teach one how to argue. The law does not certainly teach one how to think. The law, for all intents and purposes, is a tool. And like any other tool, you do not become smarter by simply wielding the tool. But those that can wield the tool intelligently, well, those are people to be reckoned with. But the law can also be fun. There were a couple of stories in particular that came out this week that illustrate as much. The first one involves a judge in the state of Michigan. This judge is running a criminal court and, given COVID, has to do so virtually via Zoom. A criminal defendant enters this judge's courtroom, the courtroom being, of course, a virtual room on Zoom. This defendant's screen name is Buttfucker3000. That's right, Buttfucker3000. Consult your local Google machine, type in Michigan Judge Buttfucker3000, and you can watch the entire circus for yourself. There is a 2.5-minute video clip on YouTube, and I believe the judge has now become a minor celebrity, if not fodder for memes. The judge's reaction alone is worth watching the video. Naturally, calling the guy an idiot for logging into court with a screen name Buttfucker3000. It will come as a shock to no one that this gentleman was a criminal defendant for guess what? Methamphetamine. Oh, you methies, never change. But the real reason I wanted to comment on this story is when you watch the video once, twice, then 3 times, you begin to notice many of the other people in the courtroom as well as this idiot who comes in with the screen name Buttfucker3000. If you ever thought that being a judge was somewhat of a glamorous, if not responsible, authoritative position, look at the other people in this virtual courtroom waiting to have their criminal cases heard. A layperson may look at this virtual courtroom and see the slovenly nature of the people who are on this call. There's a man in a cut-off t-shirt. There's a man who looks like he's wearing a hoodie and or some other sweatshirt. Naturally, there's a man who's showing up, again, although virtually, with a hat on. These are criminal defendants. These are people who are showing up to court after having been charged with a criminal offense. Now, the layperson may look at that and say, well, it's a virtual call, and people are obviously more casual in a virtual setting than they would be had they been called to show up in person to the courtroom in order to face this charge. Wrong. Wrong. Anyone who's been practicing law long enough knows that people think courtrooms are no different than their living rooms. I've often heard people say that a courtroom can be an intimidating setting. And I believe rightfully so, because given the way many people treat an appearance in court, if the setting itself didn't convey some level of authority, you'd have situations like Spicoli at Fast Times at Ridgemont High. They'd literally order food during the proceeding wearing clothes that most of us wouldn't even do yard work in, much less use to wax our cars. Although Buttfucker3000 will have his 15 minutes of internet fame, the sad and ironic reality of it is that that's just another day that ends in Y for our criminal courts and, unfortunately now, civil courts all over the country. And before we move on, I do want to comment on what is now the 21st century "the dog ate my homework" excuse. Any social media post that casts someone in a negative light, what do you hear from that person? My account was hacked. Someone else did it. The dog ate my homework. Buttfucker3000 claims that his sister actually set up his Zoom account. He then went on to offer up an excuse that somehow his iPhone may have populated the screen name, given that that's the screen name for a Bluetooth speaker. Police say this all the time, and it certainly is appropriate here. Thank God they're stupid. When it comes to criminals, thank God they're stupid. Have you set up a Zoom account on your phone? You download an app, you open the app, the first thing that it asks you for is your name. The app is trying to make the interface as simple and as intuitive as possible. Hey, stupid, start with entering your name. It does not speak well to democracy, to freedom, to the American way of life in the 21st century, when people can stumble about, can struggle, and can screw up writing down their goddamn name. Typing out their goddamn name. I'll throw in the fact that it's also tax season, and one of the complaints that the IRS has, specific to having to reject people's returns, is that people file returns with no name on them. You know the part of the form at the top that asks you for your name? People routinely fill that form out, send it to the IRS, and they don't put their name on it. At least Buttfucker3000 gave himself a moniker. There are millions of idiots in this country who are still signing documents with an X, and they're too stupid to even realize it. Life is often as hard as you make it. The next story I wanted to comment on involves an attorney who represents Jacob Chansley. Are you familiar with this gentleman, Jacob Chansley? He is a QAnon contributor. He goes by the name Q Shaman and was a participant in the Capitol riots on January 6th. his defense attorney had some choice words for not only his own client, but for a number of the actors specific to these Capitol riots. The attorney, Albert Watkins, is claiming that his client has Asperger's syndrome. Now, this is important because clearly the attorney is trying to establish a diminished capacity defense, that this person, because of Asperger's syndrome, may not have the mental capacity, the mens rea, to form the appropriate intent in order to meet all of the elements of the crimes he's been charged with. But I'd like to go to the specific comments that Watkins made after asserting that his client had diminished capacity. A lot of these defendants, and I'm going to use this colloquial term, perhaps disrespectfully, but they're all fucking short bus people. These are people with brain damage. They're fucking retarded. They're on the goddamn spectrum. But they are our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors, our co-workers. They're part of our country. These aren't bad people. They don't have prior criminal history. Fuck. They were subjected to 4+ years of goddamn propaganda, the likes of which the world has not seen since fucking Hitler. Now, in light of these comments, what did the Puritans do? Oh, they threw themselves a tantrum. They threw themselves a tantrum because he used some foul language. But I want to point out something about the law that a lot of people don't appreciate. And it's the fact that the law is a business. Your interaction with the law, dear listener, is often as a client, as a litigant, and you don't see the law as a business. You see it as some sort of institution, a search for truth or justice. The law is a business, and the courts are simply instruments to amicably resolve disputes. And let me repeat that so that you understand the force, the ramifications of this reality. The law is a business, and the courts are simply set up to amicably resolve disputes. There is no truth at the end of the rainbow. There is no justice. You have an outlet. Other people have an outlet. You go, you try to resolve these disputes. The people don't gather weapons and ammo. They don't rally neighbors, relatives, community members to take up arms. You go to court, you get a result, you can appeal it or live with it. You want truth, you want justice, go to church, go to temple, go to mosque. The law is a business, and the courts are simply a forum to amicably resolve disputes. Now, given that the law is a business, lawyers, practitioners, are business people, businessmen, businesswomen. One must promote their business. This is where the law is at its most entertaining, its most fun. Lawyers have been self-promoters in the vein of boxers for decades. Regardless of the law, regardless of the facts, many lawyers can increase their public exposure, can increase their business by taking on high-profile cases. But it's not simply taking on the case. One must then become an iconic part of the case, a central figure in the case. If you're running a business, you need paying clients. You need to increase your profile such that clients keep coming to you, clients keep paying you. Muhammad Ali said, "I am the greatest." Love him or hate him, people wanted to watch his fights. Albert Watkins says QAnon supporters and Capitol Hill rioters are a bunch of fucking short bus people. If he goes out and gets Jacob Chansley a reduced sentence, possibly a not guilty verdict, bravo, good sir. Bravo. That is the perfect marriage of form and substance.
Act 3 philanthropy aside, Bill Gates is just like Tiger Woods.
None of us went through life being the most socially graceful person at all times. Part of growing up is going through socially awkward situations. But this is how one develops social graces. Not everyone learns from these types of situations in their adolescence. In fact, many people do not have any social graces as they develop into adults for a plethora of reasons. When all of the details surrounding the Bill and Melinda Gates divorce began to emerge, it immediately struck me, this guy is just like Tiger Woods. As a man, I have no idea, as stupid as I was in my early teens, in my mid to late 20s, what it would be like to have millions and millions of dollars bestowed upon me, to have all of the public exposure, to be the center of public attention. I have no doubt that I would have handled it poorly. I also have no doubt that acquiring such wealth and such fame in such formative years would have had an impact on the way I grew and developed into an adult. What I find most interesting about Tiger Woods and Bill Gates is the fact that from all of the information that we have, these were dorks in their formative years. And I'm not so sure that they weren't dorks well into their ascension in the public eye. I don't see Tiger Woods having an entire infrastructure of people around him to set up affairs much differently than I see the relationship between Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein. I don't want to come off and immediately condemn Tiger Woods or Bill Gates because who knows what I would have done in the same or similar situation. What I want to believe is that I would be more like a Leonardo DiCaprio, someone who would leverage the money and the fame into numerous relationships with beautiful starlets all over the world. I want to believe that by developing some level of social grace in my teens, in my 20s, that I wouldn't engage in conduct that was so detrimental to myself. And of course, engage in conduct that may be so detrimental to other people, namely women that I'm attracted to. Time does heal all wounds. When Tiger Woods' name is mentioned, although his past certainly comes into play, top of mind is no longer the affairs, the way those affairs were conducted. It's very likely the same will happen for Bill Gates. But as someone that holds himself out as a pioneering public figure in world health, the environment, and social responsibility, I think Bill Gates' image is going to be forever tarnished. Tiger Woods never held himself out as a moral authority, as a conscientious figure. Tiger played golf real good, and people liked that. Even after a decade, I think Bill Gates is going to have a hard time making pleas to world governments and major corporations about environmental responsibility, about social responsibility. What's ironic is that this is a man that pioneered the very nature of the environment that's going to condemn him for decades to come. Here's a man who built the machines, the technology that created the infrastructure for the internet, for social media. The internet doesn't forget. As so often happens in art and in life itself, his creation has turned on him. But at its core, Bill Gates turned on himself. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.